need to talk about the 9/11 Commission. Even if we all agreed, okay, it's a garbage report, everyone had conflicts of interest, they're not the only ones to have investigated this. There have been scores of books written about Al-Qaeda, about the lead-up to 9/11, about the reasons for 9/11, the aftermath of 9/11, the investigation itself, people who are excoriating the Bush administration.
No, I know,
the administration brought it on with their own policies. So it's not it doesn't have to be about the commission. You keep coming back to the commission.
I keep coming back to the commission because they said that their job was to provide a complete and full accounting of the days of September 11th. Okay, I mean, authors of books were not tasked to investigate the murder of almost 3,000 people. The 9/11 Commission report.
Not it was the 9/11 Commission.
No, their task was to provide a complete and full accounting.
But they weren't investigating. Okay, hang on, Pat, go ahead.
It was the FBI that was actually tasked to do the investigation. What the 9/11 Commission report did was supplement that investigation with some of their own investigatory work and as well with testimony from people in the government. But at the same time, the FBI, this was the largest investigation in the history of the FBI. In fact, I think at one point half of all the agents in the FBI were involved in this investigation, which was called Key Bomb.
So, well, Dylan, go ahead.
So the commission, the commission
I'm reading,
to summarize that.
I'm reading from the 9/11 Commission's website right now. The National Commission on Terrorist Attacks upon the United States is chartered to prepare a full and complete account of circumstances surrounding the September 11th
we all know that, Dylan. The point Pat raised was that the FBI devoted hundreds of thousands of man-hours to investigating this, and the 9/11 Commission drew from that, right?
Yeah, they also drew from testimony gained through torture.
Well, okay, if you want to go down that road, Dylan, would you agree, do you concede that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who was interviewed before he was captured, discussed his role in 9/11?
I know that the 9/11 Commission relied on him for a majority of their information.
No, that's not what I asked you. Was he interviewed before he was captured, and in that interview, did he brag about his role in 9/11?
He may have, but again, we're talking about here.
No? Okay, no. We're talking about Khalid Sheikh Mohammed.
I understand that, but we're
yes
talking
or no.
But his information that was provided to the 9/11 Commission, which was supposed to be the final say, was provided mostly under torture.
Okay, so we'll ignore that. Was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, I'll put the question to you, was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed interviewed before he was captured, and did he discuss September 11th?
As far as I can tell, yes.
I'm asking Pat. Pat, go ahead.
Absolutely. And as far as under torture, they're describing now the story, and apparently initially they did use the waterboard on him quite a bit, but after a while he became involved in the process and started, almost holding lectures for these CIA members on how Al-Qaeda worked and how it operated. This was an article, I believe it was in the Washington Post like about a week and a half ago. Very interesting article. Obviously somebody who is proud of what he did and makes no apologies for it.
Even before he was waterboarded, he was quite defiant that we got you, you're going to get hit again. Before waterboarded.
Absolutely.
All right, let me put you both on hold here. We're going to take a break. A lot more to talk about with our guest Pat Curley with Screw Loose Change, screwloosechange.blogspot.com. Dylan Avery, loosechange911.com. Loose Change 9/11 An American Coup, I think, is available later this month. It's Rob Breckenridge. We're back after this.
You're listening to the Rob Breckenridge Show on AM 770 CHQR. Want to add your 2 cents worth? Call now. 403-974-TALK. That's 403-974-8255. Or toll free. 1-800-563-7770.
Where do we stand? What am I supposed to do?
Rob Breckenridge, the Rob Breckenridge Show. We continue our discussion here with Pat Curley from the website Screw Loose Change, Dylan Avery, the filmmaker behind Loose Change, 9/11, An American Coup. Dylan, I want you to try to clarify something for me, because what I sense from the truthers is it applies to the World Trade Center buildings and this notion that they were brought down by something. You guys seem to leap back and forth. On the one hand, it's explosives, just like a controlled demolition. People heard bang, bang noises, and then all of a sudden it's kind of secret nanothermite, very silent, incendiary, cut through the steel beams. Which is it?
Well, I know that Stephen Jones is the closest person, the person that's come the closest to discovering any actual evidence of explosives inside the World Trade Center, and so far, the only responses I've heard is A, it's paint, B, there's no way of proving where the samples came from, which is false, or C, lying. And it's not paint because Stephen clearly outlines this in his paper, the steps that he went through to clarify that they were
Well,
not
no,
paint.
that's not quite true.
Well, let's hear it then.
Well, he didn't identify what kind of paint he tested. He claims that, as I understand it, MEK didn't dissolve or did dissolve it, but that doesn't apply to all types of paints. It dissolves some, it doesn't dissolve others. It dissolves some nanothermite, it doesn't dissolve some nanothermite. Other people who have looked at this, people like Frank Greening, say that it's not. It's certainly not thermite or thermite, which you guys have been claiming for years, and this notion that it's nanothermite. He didn't test any nanothermite, did he?
Well, first of all, it's hard to get samples of
Okay, but he didn't
nanothermite.
test it.
He's compared the traces that he received with other traces of known nanothermite, and from what he's gathered, the peaks that they're getting are actually stronger.
Okay, so that wouldn't go bang, though, would it?
Well, again, we're talking about, it's like I'm trying to talk to you about legitimate evidence, and you're trying to change the subject and say there were no loud bangs. I'm talking about
Well,
nanothermite.
I'm just asking which it is. If it's
I'm telling
nanothermite,
you,
that's
I'm
not going to go
telling you
bang.
that
And if that's used, that's not going to look like a controlled demolition, would it?
I am telling you that Stephen Jones is the person that has come the closest to finding evidence of explosives
Pat, go
in
ahead.
those buildings.
Well, let's talk about the provenance of his samples. In your latest film, you do put Janice McKinley on there, and she explains that it came from out of her apartment, which she vacated for several weeks because it was very close to the World Trade Center. And actually, apparently, the windows in her apartment were broken open by the force of the onrushing air from the collapse, and a lot of the dust got deposited in there. Well, she's, gone for several weeks. She comes back and gets this dust, moves out to California, becomes part of the 9/11 Truth Movement, submits these samples to Dr. Jones. Well, number one, while she was out of her apartment, they were working on the demolition of the World Trade Center. In other words, cutting it down and trying to find any bodies or rescue anybody that was in there. So there would have been a lot of these iron microspheres, which is the other part of the argument that he raises, that, once they found the, quote, thermite or nanothermate or whatever the latest version of it is, that they were then told to look for these microspheres. Well, here's a contaminated sample that was out there for, several years in California sitting in her garage, and this is what he's relying on.
No, actually, Jeanette is one. No, you're lying there, Pat, because Jeanette is one of the many samples that Stephen collected.
I have heard that there were four, and, the one other one that I've actually heard was from a guy who collected them off of a iron railing on a fence.
Well,
So,
again,
you're
obfuscating Jeanette McKinley, and I'm trying to point out to you that it's more than one sample, and he's trying to get more.
Yeah, but where is the chain of custody for these samples? It's something that was sitting in somebody's garage or something that was sitting somewhere else.
So I have an idea. I have an idea, Pat. Since you're so determined in establishing a chain of custody for all these samples, why don't you start talking to these people?
Well, why doesn't he submit them to an independent lab?
I believe he has, and I believe that a group of scientists just independently confirmed his findings. So,
Frank Greening has been asking for samples for years.
Pat, I have an assignment for you. If you want to get up on the radio and say that there's no chain of custody for Stephen's samples, why don't you find the chain of custody? Why don't you investigate?
I have, as far as I've been able to. I don't think Dr. Jones is going to respond much to me, to be honest with you.
Okay, well, let me ask you. Okay,
no, but I'm not talking about Dr. Jones. I'm talking about the other three samples that Jones obtained. Reach out to those people.
Okay, look, if that's your modus operandi to talk to people, I'm curious why. I'm curious if you even know, first of all, who Thomas Donnelly is.
The name's ringing a bell, but you're going to have to tell me who.
Well, I find it odd that you don't know who he is, given that you refer in your film repeatedly, in an interviews you give repeatedly, to the reports he wrote for the think tank Project for a New American Century. He wrote the words Pearl Harbor that you talk about all the time, and yet you never mention him. You don't know who he is. You never asked him what he meant by it.
Great. So, once again, you're changing the subject by asking
We're
me.
talking about your film.
No, right? I know, but again, I was asking Pat if you would establish the chain of custody for these samples, and you changed it to say, oh, you don't know who the author of
No,
the T-19
you're saying that he should go and talk to these people. That it's not enough to research and find out what's available. That you need to go and talk to these people. So I want to know why you don't go and talk.